Connecticut is recognized for 30 seconds.
The words have almost all been said. Search your soul, consider your oath. And I add 4 more words. Reflect on your legacy. My friends, which way is history flowing right now? Will Donald Trump join the pantheon of Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, and Reagan? Or will his 33% approval ratings and the condemnation of principled Republicans consign him to the heap of reviled demagogues with Joseph McCarthy and Andrew Johnson? Where he goes in history, you go in history. Unless today you make a stand.
Nonsense.
I would like to remind members to please direct their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from New York reserves.
Shameful Democrats.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
Here is an honest man, Jim Jordan of Ohio.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Hawaii, Mr. Coward.
The gentleman from Hawaii is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, as a member of our armed forces, now a member of Congress, I have taken and given the oath of office many times. I will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. On January 6th, the President violated this oath, inciting violent and deadly insurrection.
Nonsense.
Our sacred oaths are hollow without accountability. We must hold this president accountable, remove him from office, ensure he can never hold public office again. I urge my colleagues to do the same. This oath has to matter. Mahalo, and I yield back.
New York.
Shameful.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, this beautiful Capitol dome is a symbol of freedom and democracy, not just for Americans, but for people the world over. The action we take today, this impeachment, is a declaration to the world that when there is an attack on our democracy, whether it comes from without or whether tragically in this instance it comes from within, we will respond to that threat and attack, and we will do what's necessary to strengthen our democracy. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2.5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Zeldin.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sickened and angered by what we all had to witness last Wednesday and call for the investigation and prosecution to the fullest extent of the law. Every single person who participated in the violence and loss of life in this Capitol building last Wednesday.
Yes.
I, as a member, sit here listening to the entire debate, desperately need to better understand the 2 standards that are at play in this House. Why is it okay if a House Democrat calls for violence in the streets, but not if you're a Republican? Why can a House Democrat be rewarded with a gavel and a chairmanship if they're calling for physical confrontation of a Trump administration official, but they will be punished if they're a Republican?
Right. That's the problem.
That we have seen time
No
and
godly
time again.
principles
I need to better understand
by
what
the
rules
Democrats
are of this House. Why is it that a committee chairman can lie to the American public about having more than circumstantial evidence that the president colluded with the Russians in order to win the 2016 election, but of course the Republicans can't and wouldn't lie to the American public about something like that? We need to better understand what these 2 standards are that are at play and to complete the record. Because the House Democrats are here to make President Trump the first president to be impeached twice. So I'll complete the record. First off, in the articles of impeachment, it's written that the president gave a speech and he told his supporters to come here and that he incited this riot. And one speaker after another here on the other side of the aisle have repeated that in the article of impeachment. But we all know that this was a pre-planned attack. We all know that there was pipe bombs being discovered while the president was speaking. We all know that the Capitol perimeter was being breached during the president's speech. We know that this was pre-planned and it started while the president was speaking. Why is that not in the articles of impeachment? Why is that not being incorporated into my colleague's remarks? To complete the record, if you want to make the president the first president to be impeached twice, well, we'll add something else to that. Thank you to the president.
Because Christ is not the center of the Republican House.
Want to withdraw from the request 30 more seconds?
Expired. The gentleman yields an additional 30 seconds, did I hear
seconds.
correct?
Yes.
The gentleman has another 30 seconds.
Thank you to the president for his efforts to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and to take out Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and Qasem Soleimani, to eliminate the ISIS caliphate, to enter into the historic Abraham Accords, to have an economy this time last year that was stronger than I ever remember in my entire lifetime. Yeah, we'll complete the record.
Amen.
And in all fairness, as the president leaves 1 week from today, let's be honest about the double standards that exist inside of this chamber. And let's also be honest that this president did a lot to make
The
America
gentleman's
greater
time
than
has
ever.
expired. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield 1 minute to distinguished I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Caston.
What happens
The
if
gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
what happens if we get this wrong is written in Lincoln's second inaugural, when one party would make war rather than let the nation survive. On December 7th, on September 11th, we came together against an enemy from without, but on January 6th, we were attacked by an enemy from within. The president who would
What
make
about all
war
the cities
would
that you
now
burned
have
down,
no
buddy?
for none.
The rioters and
We must come
looters
together in
and
unity
arsonists
today
and
against that
racist
domestic threat
murderers
to our Constitution. The alternative is too unbearable.
all
to
summer
contemplate.
long.
We must impeach bipartisanly, unanimously, if we
Nonsense.
have the soul.
The president's done
The
nothing
gentleman from
wrong
New York wishes
to be impeached for.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Fletcher.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of the article of impeachment and in opposition to the gaslighting that is masquerading as debate in this chamber today. I was in this chamber when the president assembled and unleashed a mob to attack the United States Capitol
Oh, such a
and
lie.
the United States Congress,
Sheesh.
the elected representatives.
I
of
watched the whole
people.
thing, lady, on
By
television.
doing so, he incited an insurrection
That's not what
against
happened.
our representative democracy itself. If that is not an impeachable offense, then what is? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What is
I
what
yield
you're
back.
The
doing.
gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman
Lying.
from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is
I
recognized.
now yield 30 seconds to distinguished gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Clyburn.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Michigan's 13th, we proudly speak truth to power, even in the face of a racist in chief. Those who incited an attack
You're the
on
racist
people's
lady,
lives do not get to
not
talk about
Donald
healing
Trump.
and unity. They have torn this country apart. They have stoked the fire and then handed the gasoline to Donald Trump. Dr. King once said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is in the presence of justice." Today, we must embody those words. And we must understand that peace must be centered in truth and action. We cannot sit, Madam Chair, sit idly by after a violent attempted coup and allow lies and hate to continue. Today, we stand up for our constituents who continue to be harmed by this
Member wishes to reserve. The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Hogwash.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Shameful.
The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong.
The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What happened last Wednesday is an absolute tragedy. And not only are we part of dealing with it now, we were part of it then. But when emotions are frayed and tensions are this high, process matters more. It matters more now than it did before.
Right.
And the reality is this. There are serious constitutional questions about these articles. And Donald Trump is going to be president until January 20th. And on January 20th, Joe Biden's going to become president. But I'll end with this.
I'm going to vote against impeachment, and that's going to give me credibility at home with my base. You're going to vote for impeachment, and that's going to give you credibility at home with your base. It's easy to point at me and blame me. It's easy for me to point at you and blame you. But on January 21st, we're all going to be back here. So use that credibility. Go back and talk some hard truths to your people. I'm going to do it, and we need to do a better job. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman from New York has 2 3/4 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Ohio has 3. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserved. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, there are more troops right now in Washington, D.C. than in Afghanistan. And they are here to defend us against the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, and his mob.
Nonsense.
My colleagues to
That's
look
a
at
lie.
the faces of those young Americans defending democracy, defending
They
us,
should have been
and
there the other
finally
day
ounce
if the mayor of
their
Washington, D.C.
to
would
do
have
the
called
right
them
thing,
in
as
like she
several
should have.
Republicans
They were
have,
waiting
and take a tough vote
all
for the future
afternoon.
of democracy, for the future of our
The
country.
gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Vesey.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, let's be clear about one thing. If we were on the eve of a Republican president being sworn in, and his Democratic predecessor had said the same thing that this president said, and incited his followers, his mob, to descend up on the Capitol, we will be joining them.
That's not what he
Not
said,
making
Mr.
comparisons,
Vesey.
Because guess what? I don't care about no base. I care about this democracy in this country. And what happened the other day should never happen again. And we need to stand up and say and do.
And what about your Black Lives Matter and Antifa marching on all the cities?
Ohio is recognized.
It's
Madam
destroying
Speaker,
him.
The Republican whip is prepared to close for us whenever that is appropriate, so we'll reserve until that's time.
The gentleman reserves.
Madam
The
Speaker,
gentleman from
I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
I was on that floor just 1 week ago, and so today the insurrectionist in chief will be impeached for insurrection. It is because he failed to defend this nation against all enemies, domestic and foreign, and he stood down near the White House and told a mob of domestic terrorists to go and show your strength, be strong.
That is a lie. That's not what he said.
We must hold him accountable. We can heal this nation, but he must be impeached today. We must impeach Donald J. Trump.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves.
Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I yield
The
3
gentleman
minutes.
from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the Republican whip, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the gentleman from Ohio for yielding. Madam Speaker, our nation still mourns the unacceptable violence and anarchy that took place in this Capitol last week. As we speak, arrests are still being made, and the anarchists who stormed our Capitol are being brought to justice, as should be the case. Emotions are still high, but in this moment, we need to be focused on toning down the rhetoric and helping heal this nation as we move towards a peaceful transition of power to President-elect Joe Biden next week. My prayers, Madam Speaker, are still with Capitol Police Officer Siegnick and Liebengood, who we lost, as well as all of the Capitol Police officers who risked their lives to keep us safe. They are true heroes, and they deserve all of our applause today.
Steve Scalise, who was shot because he was a Republican in Washington.
Madam
Attack.
Speaker, I've seen the dark evil of political violence firsthand, and it needs to stop. But all of us need to be unequivocal in calling it out every single time we see it, not just when it comes from the other side of the aisle. I oppose this rushed impeachment brought forward without a single hearing. And by the way, the Senate will not even take this up until President Trump is out of office. So let's keep that in mind. It will only serve to further divide a nation that is calling out for healing.
Absolutely.
Madam Speaker, many speakers today have invoked one of our nation's greatest leaders, President Abraham Lincoln. Maybe we should follow some of Lincoln's wisdom that he's imparted upon us in moments like this. As Abraham Lincoln was giving his second inaugural address in March of 1865, Lincoln issued us a challenge. This is what he said: "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all our nations." Madam
Amen.
Speaker, in times like these, let us not reach out to our darkest demons, but instead, like Lincoln, seek the higher ground. May God bless this great United States of America. I yield back.
Amen.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
And the Speaker, we can have all this, but we have accountability too. I now yield our remaining time, 1 minute, to the distinguished Majority Leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
The majority of the leaders recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman for yielding. This is a troubled time, a sad time. It is a time where all of us have stood almost to a person and lamented the violence and the assault on this Capitol and the assault on democracy itself. It was right to do that. But this impeachment ought to be put in the perspective of what the Republican chair of the Republican conference said it was. She said the President of the United States summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of that attack. There has never been, she said, a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of this office, of his office, and his oath to the Constitution.
And that was the daughter of Dick Cheney, who hates and has hated Donald Trump ever since he's elected.
We are here today, just a week before that president, at the request of the American people, will leave office. And the issue is, what do we do? The 433 of us, I believe, who are here, do on behalf of the American people to respond to what Representative Cheney described happened on the 6th of January. A mob assembled by, summoned by,
Now that's a lie.
spoken to light the flame of the attack.
They weren't a mob, and they weren't summoned to do anything, fight for the president.
To stop the steal,
Nonsense.
as we sat here, exercising our constitutional duty, and to his great credit, the Vice President of the United States following the Constitution of the United States of America. Notwithstanding the fact that he was opportuned by the President not to do so. That mob sent by the President to stop the steal did so for a few hours.
And that same vice president said you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Also, Mr. Hoyer.
And so we ask ourselves, what do we do? What is our responsibility? What should we say in light of only the Civil War has an analogy? That doesn't mean there haven't been demonstrations in Washington before and demonstrations throughout this country before.
What about the ones all summer?
And only physical presence other than the 9/11 attack on this nation, which came from abroad.
What about the summer? All the rioters, the looters, the murderers,
This attack
the arsonists.
was not from abroad.
It was the Black Lives Matter and Antifa, the Democrats.
Assembled and inflamed by the President of the United States.
And what did you say about them when they did that? I didn't hear you out there saying it then.
Words that there has never been a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I pride myself as a member of this Congress who for 40 years has worked in a bipartisan fashion with many of your leaders and do to this day. But are we to remain silent in the face of Liz Cheney's saying this was the greatest betrayal of the duty of the President of the United States in history? Are we to stand
That was a
silent?
political
Will we stand
statement
silent? Will we not
for the
stand up
rhinos in the Republican Party.
and say,
Shamefully. That's what we see them ganging up to do, the ones that call themselves the Lincoln Group.
Donald Trump has made no effort to
You
hide
can
his
tell every
ambitions
one of them by
or
what
his
they've been
lacking
saying.
of Republican
Political.
Not
Following
principles.
Mitt
The
Romney.
principles that Abraham Lincoln was just
Blake.
quoted as having said. Your president, our president, has never displayed those in the 4 years he's been president of the United States. He has allowed little constraint on his worst inclinations. His desire for autocracy and his glorification of violence have not been tempered, but rationalized by those who sought to profit financially and politically from their proximity to power. Upon the
Nonsense.
foundations of virtue,
Where's the media been in all this? Siding
laid
with
down
you,
by George
the
Washington, our
Democrats.
first president, Donald Trump has constructed a glass palace of lies, fear-mongering, and sedition.
And you impeached him before, or tried to. You had him investigated by Mueller, and you spied on him and tried to destroy him before he got into office.
Kind of man sitting in the
Now you
Oval
want to
Office
throw
with
him out
intentions
in a
and
false
capabilities.
impeachment
The curtain has been pulled back.
with he has 7 days left to
The
serve.
office to which he was elected
Shameful
could not
and
temper
ungodly.
or reform him. Washington's legacy was passed down to us not as written decrees. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. The House will be in order.
Well, we're tired of listening to him. No wonder they're out of order.
The gentleman,
Washington's legacy was passed down to us not as written decrees, but understood norms. How we ought to act, how we ought to conduct ourselves. Term after term, each occupant has observed those norms out of a recognition that our Constitution's articles are not the only preservative of our democracy. For more than 2 centuries, Madam Speaker, whenever those norms were tested and strained, good and virtuous citizens on both sides of the aisle found common purpose in reaffirming those norms. But memory fades, and from time to time it must be refreshed.
Well, I'd like to refresh your memory, buddy.
The Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin
I've been
was
around
asked
here
whether
for
they had made
77
America
years,
a monarchy or a republic.
and I have never listened to such a bag of bull hockey.
A republic, he answered, if you can keep it. That's the question today. If we can keep it. And the way we keep it is to say no.
No,
Action,
no impeachment. That's right.
words
That's what you
that
should
do
say.
not promote the keeping of that republic. For millennia, people have understood that a republic is only as stable as and lasting as the citizens and leaders who commit themselves to its upkeep.
It's only as lasting as long as you're in God's
President
will,
has shown us
which you are not
he's not committed to that project.
by
His
this
tweets
impeachment.
every day have shown he is not committed to that project. Indeed, he openly disdains it and appears to prefer the alternative. But what of the rest of us? Those who have the honor and the great privilege and the weighty responsibility to represent the views of 750,000 of our fellow citizens. We in this Congress have an opportunity, no, a duty, to demonstrate our commitment, both as leaders and as citizens, to keeping America a republic. A republic that resolves its differences not through being ordered to come to the Capitol to prevent them from stealing the election, which was an absurd assertion from the very
Well, clean up the
first
elections,
day it was
Denny Hoyer. Clean them up. They're
We cannot
all
erase
in violations of the
the last
law.
4 years, Madam Speaker. We cannot turn back the clock, but we can look to the ideals and principles inherited from great presidents like Washington, like Jefferson, and yes, certainly like Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, and from outstanding Americans like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Susan Anthony, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, our beloved John Lewis, and yes, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who taught us a lot about equality and inclusion.
All right, how to kill babies.
It's
And
up
you're
to
killing
us
them
to
by the
restore
millions
the
in this
vibrancy,
country,
Madam
Representative
Speaker, of our
Hoyer.
democracy by
Killing
reaffirming
babies by the
our
thousands
commitment
and
to the
thousands
norms
and
they passed
thousands.
on to us
And you're paying for them
entrusted to
with
our
government
care.
funds. And it's going to get even worse
But to make that
under
possible,
Joe
Madam
Biden.
Speaker, we must rise to this moment and not only affirm the virtues we cherish, but reject the vices we abhor.
You sure don't reject
That's what I'm asking
abortions.
my fellow representatives on both sides of the aisle to do today.
Donald Trump did, but you don't.
We all stood and we abhorred the violence that occurred and the threat to the very democracy that we hold so dear and swore an oath to protect and uphold. Reject deceit. Reject fear-mongering. Reject sedition.
We already know you've got the votes in
and
the
insurrection.
Congress with the Democrats to pass
Reject
this.
the demand for fealty to
So
one man
all this
over
is
fidelity
political
towards country.
theater, because you
When I
failed to
addressed
give
the
the
House
president
during
his
debate over the
chance
articles of
to
impeachment
speak
December
in
2019,
defense.
I said the following.
Shame on you.
We need not ask who will be the first to show our courage by standing up to President Trump. The question we must ask, who will be the last to find it? Senator McConnell, Representative Cheney, a number of other representatives who have spoken on this floor with great courage, Madam Speaker. Because there is much fear of Donald Trump. There's much fear of Donald Trump's tweets. There's much fear of Donald Trump's retribution for opposition. In my view, Donald Trump demands absolute loyalty.
No,
gives no
God demands loyalty. Absolutely.
I hope others
And that's
will
where
join
all of you should be,
Liz Cheney.
answering to God.
I hope others will be honest with themselves and with their constituents. As Liz Cheney was saying, there has never been a greater portrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. Don't dismiss that.
He hasn't betrayed his
She's the daughter
oath.
of a vice president of the United States who was the whip when I came to Congress. As she has taken a stand, I hope others will as well, Madam Speaker. Soon,
Her stand is all
the clerk will call
political
the roll.
for the new Republicans that she wants
Ask
to
for
be
our
in
votes.
control of.
Make no mistake.
All this about is trying to keep Donald Trump from
This will
running
be no
again
ordinary
for
vote.
president in 2024.
This is
Shamefully.
about our country, our Constitution.
And
our
the
democracy.
hatred that
These
Joe
votes will
Biden
be
and
inscribed on the roll of history.
Harris have
A
for
record of
Donald Trump
courage, of our
and
commitment to country and Constitution.
Pelosi, Nancy
Our
Pelosi,
commitment
and
to the rule of law,
Chuck
and renewal of that
Schumer,
which we inherited
and yes, you, Stenny,
and hope to pass
Aryer.
on.
You've had it.
Unbroken.
You're one of those people that's been there 40
Unshattered.
years, like
With
Joe
just 7
Biden.
days left in the president's term,
Why
this
we
vote
need
is not about timing.
term limits.
It is about principle and fidelity to our Constitution. It concerns the clear and present danger facing our country, not only in these final days of the Trump administration, but in the weeks, months, and years that will follow. It is about the necessity to demonstrate to this generation and to future generations the duty we share to protect our democracy every single day.
Well, you're not protecting it by this. I can tell you as an advanced government teacher that you are the one that's jeopardizing the Constitution
At any cost.
by this
By the way,
hastily
if the
liberal
Vice President
move.
doesn't do my bidding and follows the Constitution, sweep him away. We know that this president would never emulate George Washington and give up his power for the good of our republic, even after losing an election. Somebody talked about a peaceful transition. There has not been a peaceful transition. I don't know what you're talking about.
Because
I
you
grew up
all,
in the same country.
you're the ones that have attacked the cities, looters, arsonists,
It was
murderers,
just days ago that the president, after
racists.
committing this terrible act, thought he had to admit that Joe Biden might, yes, be president of the United States. We know that this president neither recognizes norms.
He
nor
shouldn't be
reflects the rule of
president of the
law. We know
United
that this
States
president
with his
is
corruption
not
with
victory.
his son Hunter
So I ask this
and his
House,
family, with
who
the
among us,
Chinese
Madam
and the
Speaker,
Russians
will be
payoffs,
recorded on the roll of history for
and he
their
won't even
courage,
answer the questions,
their commitment,
and the media hides it from the American
Constitution,
public. They
and
should
their
be
country.
ashamed of themselves.
We do this today not for politics. We don't
Oh,
do
yes,
this
you
for
do.
politics.
This is all politics.
Georgia
Completely.
showed that. There was no mistake in this election.
Yes, there was, too.
We do
Many
this
mistakes
today
that were made.
to preserve and
But you
protect
won't investigate
this
it.
great
You won't
democracy. We
appoint
do
a
it for the
commission to
America
look
we
at it.
love. Our America the Beautiful, whose founders' sacrifices we praise in song. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. Sadly, Madam Speaker, as our current president, the appropriate words would be, who less than self his country loved, and victory more than truth. Vote for this, for America, for our Constitution, for democracy, for history. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired.